This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Friday, September 14th, 2018, and my guest is Jose Andrade. Hi, how are you, Jose?
Hello, Miriam. Good to be here with you.
I know it's been a while since we've talked even.
Oh, it's probably been several years.
Oh, yeah. In case you guys don't know, the audience, Jose worked with me at Engadget back in the day. And so I was like, who is a very good analyst in terms of, has a good pulse, finger on the pulse of mobile that I should talk to? That's not maybe a person that you guys listen to and know. And Jose came up. And so there we are, right? Apple happened this week. It's a big week in the industry, and I'm sure you have tons of opinions.
Oh, absolutely. No, super exciting. Every time there is an Apple event, I get all like giddy. I am a huge Apple fan, but I am not a fanboy. So right. Yeah.
I'm the same. Like I'm not an iOS user. I'm a Mac user. So I really do enjoy, a good, what would I say? I enjoy a good Apple product, but I wouldn't say that I'm head over heels on iPhones. But I do think that they're obviously super significant to the mobile space. And that's why we want to spend an entire show, I'm warning you, mostly an entire show talking about the new iPhones that were launched on Wednesday this week. So, Jose, what's your initial take? Like just 3 or 4 words, maybe a sentence to summarize how you feel emotionally about this.
Yeah, so as you said, you're super excited. Every time there's an iPhone announcement, I get super excited. I am not an iPhone user 100% of the time. Also, I moved to Android a couple of years ago. But my impression was that it was a good announcement, a good event, good devices, but not good enough for me. Okay,
so what are the initial things that immediately make you go, no? Not good enough for me.
The price, absolutely. Now the higher end went up to $1,100. That is crazy.
That is pretty damn high. I agree with you. But that's the direction that the industry has been taking. And I think Apple has been driving the industry in that direction because as they're selling less phones, they want to be, having higher profit margins. It makes perfect sense to me. And, people are going to do it anyway.
Absolutely. Apple is going to push the market to wherever the market wants to go. If people keep buying the $1,100, $1,400 phones, people are going to keep making them. So I don't blame Apple as a company for trying to make more money. What I do blame is the consumers that we are supporting this type of move to higher and more expensive phones that really don't offer that much more than a cheaper phone.
Right. So what you're suggesting basically right now is you're saying we should also stop buying iPhones and look at the Android options out there because there are many that are really actually very compelling. And we can talk about some of the alternatives because I think there are some folks on this podcast who are probably iPhone users who are in the same boat as you, are kind of like, I think I need to move on. So let's make some suggestions maybe later in the show. But I agree with you. Pricing is egregious. I feel that I just can't blame Apple though, because I can totally see how they're manipulating the situation. They're selling less phones. They can demand a higher profit margin, so they're demanding it. And they know that they're going to drop a few people, but I think overall it's still a status symbol. And they've got people locked in with iMessage and other features. So I think they can, it's for better or for worse. I know it's not right, but I think they're doing it because they can. It's the same reason, and we can discuss this, why they removed the headphone jack adapter and the headphone jack in the first place, because they can.
I am completely with you. Apple can and Apple will do it. Apple is a company. It is the highest market cap in the world right now, I believe. So Apple is going to do whatever is better for their shareholders. They work for the shareholders. So I don't blame Apple at all completely. And Apple will continue to do this type of things. Actually, I do want to clarify one thing really quick. I do work for Google. I don't work on the Pixel phones or on Android. I work on Google Cloud. But everything I say on the podcast is going to come from me. I don't represent Google because I am going to be suggesting some Android options. Yes.
Of course. And I want to make sure everybody understands that, yes, Jose works for Google, but nothing to do with phone. There's no conflict of interest here. This is really more a philosophical discussion on operating systems and on ecosystems and on hardware. And philosophical probably is a bit much, but I mean, a preference, right? Price is a huge part of the decision-making process when buying a mobile device. So that is definitely the first thing. What other things, is there anything else than price that is making you pause?
Not be precisely, but I will like a smaller size phone. People have complained that the SE is not an option anymore, that the cheaper phone is the iPhone 7. And I do see a space for a smaller phone. I like to use my phone in one hand. For a while, I was using the iPhones Plus, and then I decided that no, I don't want to use my phone with two hands. I want to use it with one hand. And my hands, even though they're not big, they're not the smallest. So a smaller version of a phone will be fantastic.
Right. And I think that's actually another thing we should definitely talk about. I am very disappointed that they dropped. Well, no, let me say, I'm disappointed that for the time being, there is no small iPhone. That's what I would like to, I have hope that they will make an updated, smaller phone at some point. Because demand, because demand will be high. I think that of all the phone users in the world, the iPhone users are the ones who want a smaller screen the most, because a lot of them are coming from a smaller screen. I mean, my spouse has an iPhone SE, and they don't want to use anything bigger than that. Right? Physically.
Yeah, now, but I don't see Apple going back to that.
That's not going back. Imagine you make a chassis the same size as the iPhone SE and you put a full screen display on there. That's an appealing proposition to a lot of people. There's nothing stopping Apple from doing that if the demand is there. So I think it's our job and you, the customer, to say to Apple, hey, this is what I want. This is what I need. Let's make it happen.
I hope that's the case, because there's definitely a need in there, especially for older people. Older people don't want a really big phone. They do want big fonts, big icons, easy to use phones. And I really do believe that iPhones are way easier to use than Android. So for older folks, iPhones are better and smaller iPhones are better.
I agree. I actually feel that I recommend the iPhone to a lot of people because it's just super simple to use. And I do feel that Android doesn't have enough of a unified experience across the platform, across the multiple devices, to be able to say, hey, this is, other than the Pixel, which is kind of a standard in a way, but it's a standard that I don't feel that Google always makes the best decisions in usability. And even though I prefer it and I'm used to it because I came from a Nexus universe and then I moved to the Pixel universe, and it's my preference and my daily driver has always been a Nexus or a Pixel, and it might continue, but I'm honestly starting to have doubts that I want to continue in that direction when I see phones like the OnePlus 6 and other Android phones that are very, very pure versions of Android that have very little skinning and customizations. Because, I'm just like, what do I get other than, maybe the camera, which is always incredibly good on the Pixel devices? What do I get that's better for, so much more money, right? Because the Pixels are pretty expensive. They're not as expensive maybe as the iPhones, but they're getting there. And the entire industry is using Apple's new pricing to, kind of raise the price of phones. Samsung's going up there. Even LG, the G7 is a phenomenal phone, but is it worth what it is, sold for? I'm not convinced, right? So I think that's some of the things that we should talk about perhaps is I think there is a stratification of pricing happening where there's a premium price point where the traditional flagships are sitting, but there's also kind of a mid-range price point for high-end phones now, where the OnePlus is sitting, where you're really not compromising much at all. I've been very critical of OnePlus in the past because I always felt that there was always something they didn't do right. And with the OnePlus 6, I feel that they've nailed it. The camera on the OnePlus 6 is a camera that I personally would feel okay using every day for the first time ever in the history of me using phones that are, OnePlus phones. So I think that they're improving, and so that's kind of why I'm like, this year I'm like, I obviously will get a Pixel 3 XL as my replacement for my Pixel 2 XL. I'll get a review unit from Google after the event on October 9th. But the question is, will that actually become my daily driver? I'm not sure. I'm not convinced.
All right, so you touch on many points in there. And for example, the Pixel 2, the pictures are fantastic, but they do a lot of processing with software. And I don't know if the other companies can compete with that. We have to see the results of the new iPhones and how they are with pictures. But my feeling is that Google has a lot more machine learning in there that it can take advantage of the experience for the picture taking. Now, I also care about the security of the phone, the updates that I'm going to be getting. And I feel that by Google manufacturing the phone and controlling the OS, they can offer more security and more stability to the users, which other manufacturers have not been able to do over time. We've seen many times that a manufacturer may drop support for a phone after 2 years, 3 years, and there's no updates, no high priority updates for those people. So that's why that's the huge benefit that I see of Google controlling everything and can compete more on a one-on-one against Apple. Now, of course, we have the European Union decision about Google not being fair, which I thought was completely unnecessary and is actually hurting the market. So yeah, those are my thoughts in regarding to the Pixel and the Google competition with these new iPhones. But on the other hand, Samsung has done a fantastic job. The Galaxy Note 7, the S9 Plus, those are great phones too. And Samsung has the manufacturing capacity to compete with Apple, which is quite interesting.
Well, in fact, they're making chips and displays for Apple.
Yeah.
But I think, look, I agree with all that. But let's going back to the iPhones for a second. Pricing. So I think I'm not surprised about the pricing. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm not at all surprised. But because basically the iPhone 10 last year redefined the premium flagship tier, which is today a tier that didn't really exist in the past. In the past, there was flagship, and you paid anywhere between $600 and $800 and maybe $900 for a flagship, depending on how much memory you got. And that was that, right? And then, of course, you had lesser pricing, phones that were cheaper, and you lost a lot on that, right? The iPhone SE was a good phone. I don't think it is a good phone today. Like, I think the size is awesome, and I wish it had a full screen display, like with a notch or whatever, like Apple's doing on the new phones. But honestly, having played with Theo, my spouse's iPhone SE, I'm like, you can tell it's a 6S guts, right? It's getting old. It's really not that fast. It's really not that powerful. And it's going to struggle with iOS 12 when it gets updated, right? So,
yes, but also consider that you are a power user. What do most of the users do? I don't know if they are using the phones the way that we use them. And that's what I often try to think. Like, what are the people actually doing with the phones, which I may not be doing?
Well, but I'm talking about, just doing simple things on the phone, like starting apps, the delays that I'm experiencing, like Theo themselves are telling me all the time, like, my phone is too slow. And I'm like, your phone is a year old and it's got the latest OS on it. How can it be too slow? And it must be too slow for them. So they're not a power user. They're just feeling the camera doesn't start fast enough and it doesn't take pictures fast enough. And I'm like, wow, okay, so you have high expectations, probably because of other people's, you see other iPhones being used, like a brand new iPhone 10, and you see how fast that is, right? So the SE had to fall off the cliff because I don't think it's fast enough. I don't think it's good enough. And also, it wasn't part of this new world order that Apple defined with the iPhone 10, which is it didn't have the Face ID, it didn't have the notched full screen, it didn't have a lot of the technology that they expect their phones to have now.
Yeah, but keep in mind that the 7 and the 8 are still current phones, and they don't have those things.
Yeah, but they're just legacy phones designed so that Apple could make the transition to their new thing. I mean, they're just the phones that people are going to buy because they're like, I will not use Face ID and I will not. I mean, seriously, once you use an iPhone with Face ID and the gestures, you don't go back. It's like, to me, killing the home button is the best thing that ever happened to the iPhone.
Yeah, I agree completely. The Face ID is a game changer. Absolutely. And there are other things that Apple could have done before, and because the market didn't request them, they implement these changes little by little, like waterproofing the phone. Waterproofing could have been done, I don't know, 10 years ago, and it wasn't done until now. And dual SIMs. Dual SIMs has been around for 15 years maybe, and they just implemented those things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, look, the point I'm taking on pricing is that the other reason the iPhone SE had to fall off the cliff was because, as I said, it was, I think, antiquated hardware, for the future of what Apple has in mind. It didn't fit into the paradigm of the new way of doing an iPhone for Apple. And it was not a profit maker anymore. And that's the other thing. With this transition to the iPhone 10 last year, Apple basically decided we're going to not just be making flagships and and maybe slightly more foldable flagship that are still sold a little longer, like the iPhone 8 is still sold and the 7 is still sold. But we want to make, we want to be known as a premium company like we are known for everything else. And I think for a while there, in part with the SE, they had they had attracted a bunch of people that could afford an iPhone at $400, but at the same time, they were deviating from their modus operandi, what they've always done, right?
Yeah, but isn't there more money selling cheaper phones? If they really want to make a lot of money, they can definitely go cheaper.
There isn't. Talk to any phone maker out there. Who is surviving out there selling cheap phones? Samsung isn't. Samsung doesn't make their bread and butter on phones they sell in India.
No, I'm not saying cheap phones. The $100, $200 phones, there's definitely nothing there. But on the $400 range, in this case, Apple is starting at $749. It's
from
huge.
Everybody I hear, nobody's making money on phones except Apple, and maybe Samsung only on the Galaxies, the premium phones. Nobody's making money making phones. OnePlus certainly isn't making money making phones.
How's that Motorola doing?
Well, how is Motorola doing? I mean, they're not doing great.
Looked into it.
They're making great phones, but I don't think their profit margins are very high on these phones. They're relying on quantity, and I don't think I look at what happened to the laptop world. I mean, eventually a lot of laptop companies fell off the cliff because they couldn't keep up with Apple, and now there's a few left, and they undercut Apple a little bit by lowering their profit margins, and that's how they survive. But if you look at it, they're surviving off the scraps of Apple, really. People buy a MacBook or, I couldn't afford it, so I bought an HP. Right?
Yes, on the laptop side, definitely. But I'm still not convinced that there's no money to be made with cheaper phones. The next 1 billion people, 2 billion people, they can only afford cheaper phones. And there is a lot of money to be made there.
When I say money to be made, I'm talking about real impressive profit margin. I'm not talking about a few dollars on each phone, right? Well, there is a business model where you sell large quantities with a small profit margin, you make a lot of money, and you still are very, very profitable.
Yeah.
But that's not the Apple way. And I think that Samsung is smart because they mix the two. They have the high volume, low profit phones, and then they have the low volume, relatively speaking, high profit phones like the Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus and Note 9. Right? And clearly, OnePlus made an entire business model around making phones that make very little profit. So is Xiaomi, right? So it's possible. But the reason that Xiaomi and OnePlus can be so successful is because they have the entire Chinese market.
Yeah, no, and I'm not going to reveal this because Apple...
people buying phones, right? But the US and the Western world, we don't have that many people comparatively, right?
Apple is Apple. They've always been high end. They're gonna try to make as much money as possible, charging a lot of money for them. If anything, what I'm really sad about is that there's no more in the environment. Like, we don't have a Windows phone anymore. We don't have a BlackBerry OS anymore. There's nothing else. It's either Android or iOS, and there's nothing else. And that makes me a little bit sad. I wish they had more options.
I agree with you. Look, I'm not arguing in favor of expensive phones. Again, I think we should discuss some of the phones that I recommend that are much more affordable in case you are wanting to switch. But I am totally understanding where Apple is coming from and going to, and while they're in the position to be able to do what they do. And so I think what I want to do now is go beyond the pricing and kind of talk a little bit about the features and what they brought to the table. I'm very intrigued by the iPhone XR. Because even though it's a little too expensive, in my opinion, if it was $649, I think it would hit the sweet spot. But $749 is cutting the price between the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus, it's pretty damn high
Yeah.
for their cheaper quote unquote phone, right? And the discussion of the iPhone XR includes, again, the discussion of the iPhone SE, because the iPhone SE had to fall off the cliff, as I said, because it was too affordable, and it was also too antiquated and didn't fall into the future model of what an iPhone should be like in terms of user experience, because it didn't have Face ID and it didn't have a gesture-based full screen display. So I was hoping the XR would be a little smaller, to kind of not as small as a SE, but kind of taking on, throwing a bone to the people who wanted a smaller phone. Because ultimately the iPhone 10 and 10s are slightly bigger than an iPhone 8, 7, 6s, 6. But if the XR was slightly smaller than an iPhone 8, 7, 6s, 6, then I think they would have been able to probably satisfy most SE users,
Yeah, I agree. And well, my issue with the XR is a little bit different. I wish it was a little bit better. For example, the screen. Why an LCD screen? Not that the screen is not fantastic. I haven't seen it in person, but I'm sure the LCD screen is great. But why not an LED? Was it because of supply, or was it because of price? Or
it's totally supply. I mean, Samsung's making all their displays, and now they're making two big, premium phones with OLED, the XS, and oh God, that name. Let's talk about the names. I should say 10s, the 10s and the 10s Max, XS Max. Ooh.
I don't know. I'm going to keep saying X. I hate it that they call it 10.
The 10s and 10s Max are essentially OLED displays. And think about it. If Samsung has to supply all those displays, they can't supply yet a third display for the XR. And also, they were able to basically cheap on the display a little bit. I mean, look, the LCDs on the 8 blew me away. I have to admit, I have a bunch of phones that are Android phones with LCDs, including the LG G7, which we mentioned before, which is one of the nicest LCDs I've ever used, IPS LCDs. But the 8, if you see an iPhone 8 or 8 Plus, that display is unreal for an LCD. So if the XR has that display, which I believe it does, it's going to be awesome. But they cheapened out by having a relatively meager resolution. It's less than 1080p, right? Mm-hmm. By having no pressure sensitivity on it, no 3D touch, right? Yep. Which is fine, because nobody uses 3D touch. But I think it kind of vexes me that they cut features from the XS, the 10s, but they really didn't cut. They cut a lot of them in this display, right? They didn't cut a lot of them in the right places, which is good. Processing and all that. That phone is going to be mature for a while. It's going to last 2 or 3 years on OS upgrades alone, which is great for people who buy today. So that goes back to another thing that I want to say is that if you are an iPhone user today and you have an old iPhone and you don't care about the size and you can afford the $749, I think the XR is the sweet spot. The 10R is the one you should probably upgrade to, because yes, you're making some compromises on the display and a little bit on the camera, but I don't think you're making any compromises in terms of the longevity of the product, because it's gonna be updated for a really long time because it's got the latest and greatest hardware, right?
Yeah, it has the same A12 chipset. Now, what I wonder with the LCD screen is that when the consumer goes to the store and they tell them, listen, this cheaper phone has an LCD screen, this more expensive phone has an OLED screen, and they're going to say, well, I want the best. And of course, the best is going to be on the most expensive one. And it's not necessarily the case.
I don't think that's going to happen. First of all, there's nobody in stores that are going to talk about LCD versus OLED. The salespeople in stores don't care. They're just going to try you sell the more expensive phone.
All right, so let's say not the salesperson at the store, but when somebody's asking you and they ask you, what's the difference between the XR and the 10s? You're going to say, well, the screen, the LCD and the AMOLED screen.
But then you'll go to the store and you'll look at the screen side by side and they will be pretty much the same, because if you look at an iPhone 8 next to an iPhone 10, I mean, the LCD is so good that I don't think you feel like you're losing out. The only thing that's really obvious between the 8 and the 10 is the screen size for the size of the chassis. And the XR, the 10R fixes that. You're getting full screen display.
Let's mention another thing, the headphone jack. Is that important or not? And I will say at this point it's not.
That's a dead herring. I mean, it hasn't been on iPhone since the 7. So I think it's important. I don't want it to go away. And we're going to talk about some of the rumors of the new OnePlus in a minute. But I'm pissed that they removed it back then, and they're never going to bring it back. So I'm not surprised it doesn't have a headphone jack. What I think sucks, and where Apple is really considering they're positioning themselves as a premium brand. When I buy a premium car, I get all the bells and whistles, right? And now I'm not saying they should have the headphone jack on there because I don't expect Apple to ever put it back. They want you to buy the AirPods, obviously. But they took out the dongle, the adapter from the box this year for the 10R, 10S, 10S Max. So that is, to me, it's like, are you serious? $9? You couldn't put a $9 dongle in the box with your $750 to, I think it maxed out as almost $1,500 for the higher end version, a higher spec version of the 10S Max.
But do people need the dongle?
$9? It doesn't matter if you need it or not. It's like selling you a BMW with a little, those little plastic covers on there is a thing you can have here, but you didn't tick that option box, so we didn't give it to you. Like the switch covers, the fake covers on your car. That's what it screams like to me. It's so petty. It's like, I can understand. It's to me, honestly, it's up there with the lack of a fast charger. But
that is Apple. Apple is going to charge you cents for adapters. Look at the
why do they
Pros.
By that reasoning, why are they still putting an adapter in the box? Everybody's got their old iPhone adapter still floating around. Why do you need a new adapter?
No. So on the MacBook Pros, you need an adapter for everything, for Ethernet, for displays, for everything you want to do. You need an adapter.
I see what
and
you're
that's
saying.
what they're doing on the iPhones.
No, I'm talking about the power adapter, right? So in the box, there was a power adapter in the old iPhones, and there was a pair of earbuds wired, and there was a headphone adapter, right, on the latest phones. And the new phones, they removed the headphone adapter. So I'm like, and they also we thought they might upgrade the power charger to a fast charger, like a high speed charger, but they didn't. They kept the old slow speed charger in there.
Yeah. Well, and I'm looking for USB-C.
So, of course. But so what I'm asking you is, why, like, if you're, by that reasoning of we're not going to include the dongle, why not include a charger? I mean, it's a shitty charger they're putting in there. So you already have...
You need a charger.
You have a shitty charger from your last phone.
If you don't have anything, you need a charger. But you absolutely don't need a dongle. You have a charger from
your last iPhone, and it works just fine.
Yeah, but not everybody is coming from a previous iPhone. Maybe it's somebody that is coming from a different phone.
Then just put a cable in there.
You can have a different cable. You can have a separate option, definitely.
You could still use the brick from your Android phone because it probably has USB Type A on it. I'm just saying, like, to me, it's kind of cheap of Apple in this extreme way to not put the headphone adapter in there, because not everybody is using wireless and not everybody wants to use wireless.
To me, it's not surprising. It's Apple. Apple is going to save money.
And I agree with you. In the same way as it wasn't surprising to me that they would drop the SE and that the prices would be high. But at the same time, that's one thing that's bugging me. I think they went a little too far there. That's just me. Yeah.
All right, so there's rumors about the iPad coming with USB-C. Why don't the iPhones don't have USB-C?
Oh, well, that's because MFI, and they make most of their money. They don't make their money on iPad accessories. They make their money on iPhone accessories. So, and the iPads are starting to be limited, the Pros in particular. They're better than laptops, some of them, in terms of performance. So they're starting to be limited insofar that they cannot transfer data fast enough and charge fast enough through USB, through Lightning. So they're going to switch to USB-C. That makes perfect sense to me.
But you see, we keep going back to this point that Apple is going to try to squeeze as much money as possible from the consumers, and it doesn't feel right. That's why I left the iPhone.
Well, I left the iPhone a long time ago. I left the iPhone after the first iPhone.
Then you've never been fully on an iPhone.
I mean, no, I have the iPhones. I buy them.
Right.
I get review units because as a tech journalist, I need to be able to have a point of reference. I need to evaluate. And I love the iPhone 10. I think it's a phenomenal phone. The reason I love the iPhone 10 is that it was the first iPhone in a long time that felt like an Android phone, in the sense that it included all the modern technologies. It had a full screen display. The notch was a little bit weird, but everybody's doing it now and everybody's used to it.
Oh, I hate it.
It had, it really pushed the envelope. I felt that with up to the iPhone 7, from the iPhone, to me, there are some milestone iPhones. The original is a milestone. The 4 is a milestone, right? The 4 brought Retina display, glass sandwich, stainless steel body. Like, it brought so many technology that are back now. Like the iPhone 10, 10s, 10s Max are stainless steel glass sandwiches, right?
Yep.
So the iPhone 4, and then the 5S, because the 5S introduced Touch ID, and until then, Android had tried for a while to give us fingerprint readers, and it sucked. It was terrible. It didn't work. And we didn't use it. And then Apple did it, and it was reliable, and it worked. And then they dragged the entire industry kicking and screaming towards fingerprint identification, and it changed the security for our phones. Do you remember how insecure our phones used to be? I didn't even use a passcode on my phone for the longest time.
Oh yeah, no, that was a completely second thought. And people refuse to put a passcode because it's too slow.
Exactly.
And you can't use it.
So the fingerprint reader solved a lot of problem, and Apple did it right, and that's why the 5S wins, in my opinion. In other ways, the 5S is a very boring phone, but to me, when they did the 6 and 6 Plus, finally I was like, big screen phones from Apple. This is a step in the right direction. My biggest issue at that point with iPhones wasn't so much that they were, kind of behind a little bit, other than the Touch ID, but it was that I couldn't use them. Like, my fingers are too big. By that point, Android phones all had big screens, and I couldn't really use an iPhone. So I was very happy when they did the 6 and the 6 Plus. But after that, 6S, 6S Plus, 7, 7 Plus, 8, 8 Plus. To me, those are evolutionary phones. There's nothing there. In fact, if you look at if you've used any modern Android phone that is full screen and has a notch, or even full screen without a notch, there's a few of them, or if you use an iPhone 10, or maybe a 10S and 10S Max or 10R, all these phones, after you use those for a little while, I can guarantee you, though, you go back to an iPhone with a home button, and it feels like you're going back a decade.
Yeah. I left the iPhone after the 6, I believe, the 6 Plus. So it hasn't been that long for me. I am relatively new to Android, even though I've been testing Android phones for forever, since the G1 maybe. But I do like iPhones quite a bit. But I just got really, really upset that the iPhone 10 increased the price of the phone so much, and that's why I left.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, and I mean, I feel like. I left a long time ago simply because I didn't like the OS. And I feel that iOS has gotten way, way better. And I think 11 was very good, although not quite good enough for me to switch back. 12, hopefully, but I'm not planning to switch back because Android gives me way more flexibility. And flexibility in every way, not just in user experience, but in software, in hardware choices, etc. But so I've always been an Android user, and that's not going to change. But I do appreciate what Apple's trying to do, and I feel that the iPhone 10 was worth its price in the sense that they really pushed the envelope. Now, that also gave them a reason to make things way more expensive. And for $749, I think the 10R is a good phone, but they're definitely cutting corners on the display. But I love the colors, and I think it's going to be a very popular iPhone. I think that a lot of people who held off on the 10 last year are going to buy the 10R this year. And the 10S and the 10S Max are going to be bought by the hardcore Apple early adopters who were on a contract stuck last year and couldn't buy an iPhone 10 last year. You know what I'm saying?
Is that still around? Are people still in contracts? I find it hard to believe.
There's a lot of people. I don't understand why. Don't ask me. I have people who listen to this podcast, wonderful folks who are super smart, who for whatever reason, and honestly, I can't argue with them because I'm not them. So they have a reason. And that reason could be a family plan. That reason could be their employees paying for it. Their reason could be all kinds of things. It's not for me to judge. I do not understand it.
Yeah,
I do not understand contracts. I do not understand it. But if that's the world you live in, and you couldn't buy an iPhone 10 next year, and you're a hardcore Apple fan, you're going to buy a 10S and a 10S or a 10S Max. And the 10S Max is really interesting because it's a phone that's smaller than the Note, slightly smaller than the Note 9, and has even a bigger screen than the Note 9.
Yeah, so, about 0.1 inches. It's not that much.
But I mean, my point is, it's interesting. It's interesting that Apple's gone to that size. I really didn't think they were going to go that big. I really thought that they would keep the iPhone 10s the same, and they did that. Then I thought the iPhone 10s, I thought they were going to call it the iPhone 10L for large. 10s for small, 10L for large, or even just call iPhone 10s both of them. And then there's, like the MacBook Pro has a 13-inch and a 15-inch, and we'd have two versions.
Yeah.
And they kind of did that except for the names. I mean, seriously, I think Steve Jobs is turning in his grave with these names. Like, what are these names, Jose? How do you feel about
terrible.
these names?
No, the names are terrible. Why couldn't they come up with something better than that? That is like the most. They had an engineer name these things. It's terrible.
10s makes sense because it's S added on. It's it's a TikTok thing, right? The TikTok year. This is the talk. The tick was a 10. Talk is 10s. Got it. Now,
Maybe.
10s, I would have just called it either 10L or the 10s, and they comes in two sizes. And I would probably have made it like not that much bigger, like 6.2 instead of 6.5. But that's just me. And then the 10R, I think it's called R for Redux. It's kind of like, in many ways, it's both a reduced 10. So Redux doesn't mean reduced, but it does mean, a revisited. And so they're revisiting what they've done in the past, which is like, I think with the iPhone 5S and 5C. The 5C was a, kind of cheaper, lower content 5S and came out with all the colors at the same time. And I think to me, the 10R feels kind of the same. It's slightly more affordable. It has all the colors. It's a little de-specced. Not as de-specced as the 5C was to the 5S. But that's why I think R stands for Redux.
Yeah,
that's
maybe.
my theory.
Now, I do tell you something, though. I may go back to the iPhone, and not because of the iPhone, but because of the watch. The watch does have some new options that are, like, fantastic.
It's true. Let's reserve that conversation for in a few minutes. I just want to wrap up on the phones. So basically, to me, I think that the 10S Max is interesting because I think a lot of people want large phones, but it's almost feels too large to me. The Note 9 is too large. That's why I was expecting this to be a 6.2 or whatever. Basically, the size that they made the 10R display is what I was expecting the 10S Max to be. And then I was expecting the 10R to be not as small as an iPhone SE chassis-wise, but smaller than an iPhone 10, smaller than an iPhone 8 with a big screen, with like a 5.6, 5.6, 5.8, and 6.2 is what I was expecting. Instead, we got 5.8, 6.1 for the R, and 6.5, which is really weird.
Now, the question is, who is using the Note 9? In my experience, I come from academia, and a lot of the PI, the researchers, they like big screens so they can read a lot of papers and stuff. So I don't know, in your experience, who is using the Note 9?
Look, the only people I know who use a Note 9 are people that are giants. There are people that stand 7 feet tall and have hands that are the size of my head, and they need a big phone, and I understand that. No, I'm just joking. I think there are a lot of people who use a Note 9. There's three categories of people who use the Note 9. People with large hands, for sure. There's also people that like the stylus and the S Pen and have been with the Note for years, right? That they've like been there since maybe the first or second gen Note, and they really love the use cases around the S Pen. And good for them. I think that it's not for me. I never use the S Pen on my Notes review units, but I appreciate it's there. I think it's an interesting twist. And then I think the third buyer is the buyer who wants the kitchen sink, right? Everything but in the kitchen sink, and they get that in the Note 9. I mean, you cannot argue that, for better or for worse, Samsung with the Note, and especially this year's Note 9, has put absolutely every bit of technology possible in a phone. It's remarkable. By the way, for those of you following at home who've been listening to the podcast for a while, I just came back from Burning Man. I spent 3 weeks there, so I did some pre-recorded podcasts. I hope they were interesting. Last week's was with Jaime Rivera of Pocket Now. That was not pre-recorded. That was a recap of IFA. But you're probably wondering, when am I getting my Note 9 review unit? Because it's been out for a while. Well, I got it finally. I was waiting to come back from Burning Man to ask them to send me one because there's nothing I can do while I'm traveling that they can't send it to me. So I have one here. It's the purple one, the pink one. Watch my unboxing video on the YouTube channel. I'll link below. But it's exactly what I was expected. It's a massive phone that's still relatively compact for its size screen because it's got few bezels, and it has every feature you can imagine on it. It's amazing.
Yeah. So which phone is going to sell more, Dex? The 10s Max or the 10s?
I think the 10s this time. In the past, I would have said the Plus phones because 5.5 inches, you needed that real estate, right? But now you're getting 5.8 inches on the 10s. Why would you even care about getting bigger than that?
Yeah, I'm with you.
I honestly, that's what I'm telling you. I don't understand the 6.5 inches. I think it's completely insane. I don't think you need that on an iPhone, especially not on an iPhone. I think that should have done maybe a 6.2 inch one that's slightly bigger. And they should have differentiated in other ways than the size. There's only the size that's different. They both have the same camera system. In the past, the bigger phone always gave you something extra, right? Like a dual camera or something. And battery life is the other reason I see people buying that phone, right? More battery life. That's all. Yeah. One of the number one reasons I hear people buying a Galaxy S9 Plus or the Note 9 versus the smaller phones is they want more battery. So I don't know. I think it's a tough sell. I think that for me it's a tough sell. I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm going to be paying attention, definitely. I want to wait until I see the first 10s Max outside of the
I hear that it's
sphere.
Not, I mean, I have a Note 9 here in front of me, and it's slightly smaller than that. So it's actually not that huge. It's just not, it just seems overkill to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's $100 more base price, too. Like, so maxed out, it's like $1,500 or $1,460 or something. Wow.
Some people saying that the phone is more expensive than their car. And that is true. My car is probably about $2,000, so it's almost there.
Wow, yeah. But the Note is also very expensive. So, anyway, I mean, look, I am, this is again a TikTok, it's the odd year. It's the 10R, the XR is the interesting phone to me. I wish it was $100 cheaper. At that price, I think I could wholeheartedly say, go get one if you need to upgrade your iPhone. At this $749, it's a little tough to, because if you can afford $749, you can probably stretch, especially on contract. And since a lot of you are on contract, you can probably stretch to $999. And then I would get an iPhone 10 for the dual camera. 10s, because the dual camera system, I've used it on the 10, is amazing. And they've added new features. There's a smart HDR, which sounds a lot like the AI-based HDR that some of the Android phones are doing, especially the Pixel.
Yep.
And they have another new feature. What was it? I can't remember.
Being able to control the focus.
Finally.
The
well, that's nothing new because everybody on Android world has been doing it. Not the Pixel, but the Samsung phones have been doing it. The Huawei has been doing it for a really long time on their phones. It's a welcome thing to be able to edit the bokeh after the fact.
Yeah.
In fact, I wish you could do it during shoot as well, like the Samsungs let you do. But hey, look, these features I feel will come to the 10 simply because they're software features at this point. So maybe they're driven by the Bionic chip, but I honestly think that even if it takes a little longer to process the image, I would be happy to see this happen. To see some of these features carry on to the existing 10 once iOS 12 rolls around. So let's see. They haven't mentioned anything about whether these features will come. But other than that, Jose, the chip is obviously super fast. It's the first 7 nanometer chip on the market, which is really exciting,
crazy.
Which means Samsung is going to make 7 nanometer chips, which also means to me that the next Snapdragon chip from Qualcomm, which is also made by Samsung, will be 7 nanometers because they have the fab, so they can do it. I mean, other than that, what else is there about these phones? I mean, am I missing anything like feature-wise? I mean, that's it.
No,
right?
no, nothing else. But I mean, what they're capable of doing now, especially with AR, I keep waiting for the year of AR. We're still not there, but I think that we're getting closer. We're going to be able to do more exciting things with AR, and that's what the chipset is going to be able to do. So when you are trying to buy furniture that you can put the furniture in your house, those AR games look fantastic, but they're still not popular enough. So I'm thinking that it may be that this is the time that we're getting to the AR year, hopefully.
Yeah, so I agree. I mean, AR is baked in now. You don't need a special phone for it. Remember on Tango, you needed a special phone not too long ago. I'm glad that, and Apple's definitely driving that hard. Google with the new Pixels last year and this year is going to be driving that hard. I'm excited to see that you can do it on basically any current phone, as it were. That's cool. But you touched on the watch. So let's talk about the Apple Watch Series 4. I'm not an I'm not an Apple Watch fan for only a single reason. First of all, I'm not an iPhone user, so it doesn't make much sense to have an Apple Watch. I'd much rather have a Wear OS watch, which is what I have. And actually, I'm getting one of Samsung's Galaxy watches, so I'm going to be using Tizen for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to let you all know on the podcast what I think. I've heard lots of really good things about the Samsung Tizen watches since the Gear S2.
Yep.
So I'm really, really looking forward to it. So to me, the reason I don't wear an Apple Watch, and they still haven't solved this problem, is two things. One is a serious concern, and the other one is completely, me being a princess. The first one is that the display is not always on. I cannot. To me, a watch it has one fundamental purpose in the universe. And that's that it tells the time at all time.
Yeah,
and I did not like that.
These are not watches anymore; they're computers.
Let me finish. In the days of the early digital quartz watches that used LED segments, they also had to push. You also had to push a button to read the time until they get to LCDs, which were more power efficient. I understand what Apple's trying to do here. It's power management's a big part of it, but actually, I tell you what the biggest reason is that they don't have an always-on display. And I know this from being a Wear OS user that has a whole bunch of Wear OS watches with OLED that I have set to always-on. Mm-hmm. It's that it wears out the OLED. I have had my Huawei Watch 1, which was the best Android Wear at the time watch that I ever used. The display wore out in 1 year with me having the always-on display. Battery life wasn't a problem. It lasted 2 days on a charge with the always-on display. That wasn't a problem. I'm sure Apple can make their watch with the always-on display and last just as good on battery. But it's the display. It's killing the display. It kills your display after a year or two. So that's why Apple's not doing it. And I get it. But to me, that I can't have a watch that if it's sitting on the table pointing at me and I'm in my bed and I can't reach the watch, if I can't read the time on it, it's not a watch.
But you don't need that. You don't need the always on display because it senses when you move your hand and it shows you the time.
It doesn't work. It's a watch. It has to have. That's my opinion. The other thing, and that's a petty thing, the princessy thing, is that I don't like square watches.
I'm kind of with you in that. I am not fully on board with the square watches, and I don't use a watch. I haven't had a watch in the past probably 30 years or something. But now I'm considering it because of the health aspects of the Apple Watch, especially the electrocardiogram. That I think is fantastic.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Look, the Apple Watch, I want to also say that my reasons for not having an Apple Watch, because I'm not an iOS user, because it's not always on, because I don't like square watches, it doesn't mean that I do believe the Apple Watch is the best smartwatch on the market by a long shot. I do believe Apple nailed it. There's a lot of features on the existing old watches that are amazing. They have the best power management. They have the best cellular implementation, all that. And as you just said, the AKG feature, which hasn't been turned on yet, but will be, is a milestone forward. I have, I have traditionally in my family a lot of heart disease issues, and so I monitor my heart health, very carefully, and I don't have any issues. But having a watch that I could wear that lets me do an EKG from time to time, or ECG, from time to time, I would totally on board with that. That's a huge step forward. And
I wonder if that's going to be the feature that is going to completely differentiate the Apple Watch from any other watch. I mean, right now, the Apple Watch is the most sold watch anyway. We do have the Android event October 9, so we'll see what Google has. I do know some things that I can't mention, but for me, the Apple Watch right now is definitely the leader and maybe the device that brings me back to the iPhone, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that they stretch the display to the corners. I mean, it's thinner. I mean, it's definitely a step forward. Until now, they didn't really evolve the Apple Watch design very much, and I like the direction they're taking with this new design. I also like the fall detection feature, which is obviously a lot of software and a bit of hardware as well. That's cool. Even the best of us that are skilled and have good balance and are young, sometimes step on a stool and fall off of it. And you're not going to hurt yourself very much if you're young and fit, but you might need help. And having that detected and not having to, just being able to try to reach your wrist to get the help you need, I think is a huge deal. And it's also a huge deal for older people who really fall often and do really need help automatically, potentially. So I think this is Apple is certainly doing some very interesting, and getting FDA approval for these products is kind of remarkable too.
It is a huge deal. Now, I do wonder if they work properly, because I can't imagine how complicated those algorithms are to be able to detect a fault. Even with all the sensors and everything, there could be a lot of mistakes that are being made in there. I mean, of course, they give you the option of calling somebody, but it does dial emergency after 1 minute. So I wonder if there's going to be calls to emergency that are false positives, and there's going to be problems there. Hopefully not.
Well,
but
I'm
we'll
sure
see.
Apple's tested this. I mean, I can see how you can implement that probably well. If you can detect the motion accurately that matches a fall. And think about it. If there's no activity for a minute, the watch is getting zero motion for a minute or very little motion, then I would definitely say that you're in a situation that you should call emergency, right? Because if you're fallen and you stand up from your fall, it'll detect that and it will cancel the call, right? Because you're standing up again.
Yep.
Right? You're okay, right? But if you're not moving afterwards, I think it's a no-brainer to call emergency at that point. And I think that can be detected. So, but you're right. There's going to be some false positives, but you know what? I'd rather have a false positive, even if I get fined for calling 911 for the wrong reasons, Because like, this is not the kind of stuff you want to mess with.
No, but the risk in here is that there's too many false positives that Apple has to disable the feature. So hopefully it doesn't get to the point, but it could happen.
I'm sure they've thought about this, and I feel pretty confident that they did it right. This is Apple. This is one of the things that I think it's really rare that Apple messes this kind of stuff up. They do sometimes, Antenna Gate, a bunch of other things screw stuff up. But I think in general, they are, I hate to say this, but as an Android user, but they do things, they have a lot less bugs in their stuff.
A lot of times they do it right, but yeah, they do some things wrong. Remember Steve Jobs, you're holding it wrong.
Exactly. Antenna Gate. I mean, look, you're right. There is a potential. So let's watch out and see what happens. It'll be interesting. Yeah. So I mean, overall, nothing. It's amazing to me how much leaked ahead of time. Like, really, there was nothing new in this announcement. We knew everything that was coming. Well, the ECG was new. I don't think that leaked. So there was a few things.
Now, what about wireless charging? That was something that was missing from the announcement. There's no Air Power anymore. Is it going to be canceled? Like, what's going to happen?
That's a good point you bring that up, because everybody's scratching their heads about that. I think it's a typical Apple thing where they weren't able to do it in time or on budget, and they're dropping it, and they're basically letting it fade away without making any noise about it, because it's very un-Apple to announce something and not ship it at all. Like, they have shipped huge delays before, but this is kind of crazy, and I really don't know what the deal is.
And I do have my hopes for wireless charging in general, because what we have right now is not real wireless charging, like wireless chargers that is completely wireless. I hope that we can get to that point that we don't need any cables and our devices are just charging when we are wearing them. That would be fantastic.
Right. Absolutely. I'm on board. I'm also glad that the iPhone XR has wireless charging. It's finally there. I use wireless charging on some of my phones, and I really like it. So I'm glad to see Apple, kind of putting this across the board. I mean, they did it with the 8 last year, but it's good. It's good news. It's kind of weird that the Air Power thing's gone, but I think it's gone, and it's just the way it is. So overall, no surprises, same old Apple, gouging people on price. But look, if you're in the ecosystem, you're going to get a great experience. I had a few friends on Facebook that are standard iPhone user, complain about, oh my God, I need a new iPhone, and I can't believe that there's no more iPhone with a home button. And I'm like, well, there is. You can buy an iPhone 7 or an iPhone 8. If you really want to, I wouldn't. And I told them, I said, look, I would, because after I started using my iPhone 10, it took me a few hours to get used to the gestures and the Face ID. And I went back to using an iPhone 6 Plus recently, just because I have one floating around, and I tried to do something with it. And I was like so frustrated with the user experience, the tiny screen, the having to use the home button. I just think it's the best thing that happened to iOS is having no home button.
But change is difficult for people. Even my wife, she doesn't like change. She's not gonna like not having the home button, and it's just because that's the way she is. She used Windows for the first 10 years that we were together, and I was able to bring her to the Mac. So change is difficult for people, and that's it.
And I agree. I know that Theo, my spouse, is going to be, when they finally have to get an iPhone without a home button, they're going to be kicking and screaming. I know it. It's going to be hard. Well, also, they're going to be really upset they can't get a small phone anymore. So I don't know. I want to talk about a few other things really quickly. I want to make some suggestions. Remember how I wanted to suggest some phones that weren't $749 or more? So obviously, in the Android world, you can buy phones for all kinds of prices. And in the past, they weren't very good. Unless you spent $500 or more, you weren't really getting a great phone. Now this is very different. There are a whole bunch of choices starting at around $200 that are really great. The Moto G6 is probably the closest phone to a premium high-end flagship that's been reduced in every way, price, specs, but not user experience, thankfully. And cost about a bit less than $250. It's a glass sandwich, aluminum and glass. It has a dual camera system that's okay. It's actually not horrible at all. It's probably better than what you have on an iPhone SE. It has a fast enough processor. It's got a nice enough display. It's basically, I cannot recommend that phone more for that price. Also, stock Android, which is really great. So there are phones
but a warning with the really cheap phones is that people don't know that they have to buy a phone more often because they're saving the money up front, but they don't last that long. The Moto
of course.
Yeah.
Although, that's a problem with Android in general. I mean, the chance of the G6 the Moto G6 will probably get, Android Pie, but I think it's not going to go beyond that, right?
No,
that's a general problem with, that's why I buy Pixels or, use a Pixel, because I know I'm going to get the first version. I'm running Android Pie on my Pixel for 2 months now.
Yeah.
And I didn't even run the beta. This is the official version. So, that's one of the advantages. And, but that's also changing. Think about this, Jose. A OnePlus 6 is a phenomenal phone for $503. It's a phone that rivals $1,000 phones and $750 phones any day of the week, any time of day, and you can install Pi on it. It's one of the phones that Google supports for testing the beta of Pi.
Yeah.
So you can have Pi on that today, and of course, now that Pi is officially out, OnePlus is working to make an official build for that's not a beta, right? So I think there are some phones that you can save a lot of money and get some seriously good user experience. You're making very, very little compromises with OnePlus 6. And the OnePlus 6T, by the way, we should just mention really quickly, is coming soon and is going to have further improvements over the OnePlus 6. But it will also supposedly, allegedly, lack one feature that I think is essential on a phone, and it's the headphone jack. And OnePlus 6 has always made a big fuss, like Samsung and LG, that they're not dropping the headphone jack, but it sounds like they're changing their mind with the OnePlus 6T. There are very, very clear rumors from Carl Pei himself, the CEO, that the OnePlus 6T will not have a headphone jack. I'm really
why
annoyed
is that?
with this.
Is it to save money? Is it why?
There is the official reason is to save space and have a bigger battery, but I think that's bull crap. I do believe that they are just trying to save a buck because it's OnePlus and they're always trying to cut corners somewhere to save money. Like OnePlus 2 did not have NFC after the OnePlus 1 had NFC and the OnePlus 3 brought NFC back. And they brought it back because people complained. But I think he cited that I'm not sure this is official citing, but apparently in an interview he said that 65% of OnePlus users are using wireless earbuds or headphones. And because of that, they chose to remove it. Because it saves money and it saves real estate and they put a slightly bigger battery in the phone. So, to me, that's still weasel words. To me, that's still BS. I'm sorry. Like you could apply yourself and do both. The saving a buck per connector, I can totally see because it's very competitive, that price point, right? So if you had given me that excuse, I would have taken that and maybe accepted it a little better. But the space and 65% of our users, that's all a load of crap.
Yeah.
So I'm annoyed, but it's a newsy part of our week, and I want to point that out. So, yeah,
Yeah, no, the OnePlus is a great phone, definitely. So the joke is, are they going to change the name now? Is it going to be called One Max?
No. That everybody pretty much knows that they do the number and the number with a T halfway through the year. They do 2 phones a year. I'm pretty sure it's going to be OnePlus 6T. I'd be surprised if they change the name, and I'm be surprised if they break any of the great things about the existing OnePlus 6. There's rumors of the fingerprint reader being under the display, which could be a bad thing because usually they are a little slower when they're under the display right now. But we'll see. Maybe they, BBK, the parent company, also owns Oppo and Vivo.
Yep.
And they've made a bunch of phones now with under display fingerprint readers. Not ones that we've seen here, but, we'll see. And supposedly the OnePlus 6T is going to be sold at T-Mobile stores. So they might actually get some pretty decent market penetration for once.
Oh, interesting, because up until now, I believe it's a little bit hard to get.
I mean, it's not anymore. Since the OnePlus 3, they've actually been relatively easy to get. There is always a bit of a production crunch at the beginning, but you can order them on their website and get it delivered, overnight. It's no harder to buy than a Pixel. So I think that's the other thing. The Pixel is getting more expensive. I think the new Pixel is going to be very interesting because I think it's going to be the first Android phone that is sold in the US that has a full-on, time of flight face identification system like the Face ID system on the iPhone. Because a lot of Android phones do Face ID or face authentication, but they don't use a 3D sensing mechanism.
Yeah.
They don't actually use the time of flight or a matrix projection or dot projection. So I think I'm very looking forward to see what Google's got in store there, because it means being able to pay with your face. All the Android phones right now, when you want to do touch to pay, you have to use a fingerprint reader or type in your code to authenticate. You can't use your Face ID system to authenticate because it's not secure enough. So it'll be interesting to see what Google does. The only phone from an Android maker that has like a 3D depth sensing front camera for face identification is the Oppo Find X, and it's not sold in the West yet, and it doesn't really support payment through that authentication system because it's, I don't think, baked into the hardware and the software like what Google is going to be able to do with the Pixel 3 and the Android P, right? So I think that's going to be the big news on the Pixel 3, Pixel 3 XL, and of course some more camera improvements, AI-based camera improvements that I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, and payments is something that I really love. I used to use Apple Pay.
I use it all the time.
Oh,
absolutely. It's fantastic. I get really annoyed when I can't use it.
Yes.
My biggest pet peeve is when I go to a place and they have a Square terminal and they don't have the little puck,
Yeah.
the little square thing to tap on or to put your chip card. I don't care about chip cards. I don't like chip cards. I don't use them. I use my phone, and sometimes reluctantly I have to pull out my credit card for swiping because some merchants, we didn't charge it today, or we lost it, or it doesn't work. It's like, fuck you. Like, I want to tap to pay. You are a tiny little box that you get for free from Square away to giving me tap to pay. And because you're backwards, you're refusing to let me do that? Screw you.
Now you travel between San Francisco and Portland, correct?
Yeah, I do have 2 residences.
Is there a difference between the amount of stores that have tap to pay in San Francisco than compared to Portland?
There's definitely more in San Francisco, but I think it's catching up really quickly. In fact, I travel all over the world for my work, and I see a lot more penetration of tap to pay everywhere. Of course, China is a different world. I use WeChat Pay there when I'm in China. It's barcode based, so you don't really need NFC for that. But China's got its own universe.
Yeah.
Speaking of other news items, I just want to quickly mention that LG has announced that their V40 flagship will be launched in New York City on October 3rd. I'm definitely going to be at the Pixel event on October 9th in New York, but I'm not quite sure that I can stay long enough to do the Microsoft Surface event on the 2nd and the LG event on the 3rd and the Pixel event on the 9th. I don't think I have the resources to be able to stay in New York City that long because it's very expensive to stay there. So I'm definitely going to the Google event. I'm not sure I'll go to the LG event, but I'll keep you posted. As you know, I'm a big fan of LG phones. The V40 might be the first phone in the world that has not just 3 cameras on the back, because Huawei's done that with the P20 Pro, but has 3 cameras on the back where one is an ultra wide angle, like they've done on their existing phones at LG. One is a regular and one is a telephoto, because until now, LG hasn't done telephoto. So having all three will be really interesting. And it's a rumor that it'll have two cameras in the front as well for depth, just like the HTC U12 Plus, which had dual in the front. So we'll see. But the V40 is interesting because it's going to be a sleek Android phone, with an almost full screen display and a notch and a whole bunch of cameras. And as usual, it will have the incredible high quality hi-fi quad DAC from ESS, the dedicated audio chip with a headphone jack, because that's LG's thing. They have the best sounding phones on the planet for the last 2 years now because of their partnership with ESS. And if you're an audiophile like me, there's only one way to go, and it's wired. And there's only one way to go, and it's with a super high quality audio subsystem. So I'm super stoked about the fact that some people are serious about the headphone jack still. And OnePlus, screw you.
And LG's fantastic phones, absolutely. The issue with LG is the branding. They haven't been able to market themselves like Samsung has. That is, it's a great phone. It's all over the place. Everybody wants it. Nobody really wants an LG phone on the regular population. And that's quite interesting.
It's disappointing, but look, the problem is that they sell them unlocked. It's really hard to get them unlocked. You pretty much have to go through a carrier to get their phones in the US. So you have to buy them unlocked, from like gray market importers. Sometimes they make them available unlocked, but not always. And then the other thing is, honestly, the prices are a little high for what you get. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the LG phones are great, but they're not in the same league as like a Samsung Galaxy in fit and finish and stuff. And I wish they were, because then the price would be justified. The good thing though is that after a month or so, they dropped in price really quickly. So you can generally you generally buy them at a price that is, really what they're worth pretty quickly. So that is something to consider. Right now, honestly, the G7, last year, the V30 was the most the most flying under the radar phone of the year. It was such a great phone that nobody knew about. I feel the same way about the LG G7 this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if the V40 is a return of that. Another awesome phone that nobody knows about and just flies under the radar and becomes a top 5 phone for the year. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, no, hopefully.
One last thing I want to mention before I get a chance to tell people where to find you. I want to talk about a camera I've been reviewing called the SiOnyx Aurora. It is a night vision, low light champion camera. It is a action cam, so it's dust and water resistant. It looks like a tiny camcorder from about 10, 15 years ago. But it's still small enough that you could kind of mount it on a helmet or something. Not as small as a GoPro, definitely smaller than a phone, although it's thicker. It's more like a brick, right? And shape. It's not like a flat slab. And it has an incredible 1-inch, 1.3 megapixel sensor in there using black silicon, which is a kind of silicon that basically doesn't reflect light. And so it absorbs light like nothing else. It doesn't require infrared illumination. It just picks up the infrared from the heat of things at night. And it is extreme low light photography, extreme low light video. I tested it at Burning Man. I will be posting some photos on my Google photo stream and sharing that with you folks later. There's an unboxing video in the show notes below. But the takeaway is that this thing can see light in conditions that are kind of impossible for any other camera.
It's impressive. It's crazy impressive.
The problem is that it's low res, so and it doesn't have good stabilization, so things can get a little blurry. Also, it's manual focus, so you have to kind of nail the focus. But it's impressive enough that I think it's worth mentioning. And the P20 Pro beat it for me at Burning Man, primarily because I wasn't shooting fully in the dark, and also because of the night mode on the P20 Pro is unbeatable for stills. But for video, the SiOnyx Aurora is, you can do video in almost no light and get something usable out of it, which is insane. And without, this is not thermal. This is not using infrared illumination. It's just out of thin air, picking up pixels, photons. It's insane. So check it out. Check out my unboxing video. I'll try to link to my Burning Man photos as well, so you can have a look. But yeah, I just wanted to mention it because they sent me a review and it's very expensive. $799 is a retail price on that thing. I don't know if it's, you'd have to be a a pretty specialized kind of photographer to get this. Maybe you hunt. It's a monocular as well, so it has an OLED viewfinder in it. So that's how you can look at it, just monitor, right? You don't have to record or take photos. You can look through it, and it amplifies light, just like a night vision scope would do. So you can use it for hunting. You could use it for if you're like a crazy outdoorsy person. So at that point, it's very specialized, and I can see the $799. But honestly, it's a tough sell otherwise, especially for stills, because a good phone like the P20 Pro can match it in low light for stills through its computational night mode system. Anyway, that's the news this week. Jose, thanks for being on. It's fun. Do you want to tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, no, thank you. It's just fantastic. And yeah, having spoken to you in so many years, that is really cool to get in touch again. So I'm really not doing anything public anymore. I'm doing a lot of consulting for Google Cloud. So if you're into infrastructure and stuff like that, and you want to talk about infrastructure, definitely look me up on Twitter at J Andrade, Andrade. Of course, I love talking about anything about technology. I am a software developer too. I'm into Raspberry Pis. So any technology topic is good with me. But right now, nothing in communications or public. But still, look me up.
Yeah, I mean, you should definitely friend Jose on Twitter. There's some good tweets there, and we work together. Lots of depth of knowledge. You're pretty. That's why I'm glad to have you on the show, because you are still super keeping track of what's going on out there.
Thank you.
And yet, while you don't have a public persona, you are connected, and I really value your opinions. You guys know where to find me. I'm ThinkGirl on Twitter. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book character without the vowels. That's also my handle on Instagram. And I'm on YouTube as well, but it's just my full name. YouTube.com/Myriam Jouar, Myriam with a Y. There's a lot of videos that complement the podcast on my YouTube. So go subscribe, like the videos, tell your friends about the podcast. It's mobiletechpodcast.com. If it's something you just stumbled upon, we're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, Slacker, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, everywhere. Just look up Mobile Tech Podcasts and maybe add ThinkGirl, TNKGRL to that in case you can't narrow it down, because those three words are pretty popular in the podcast world. And subscribe, tell your friends. We want to grow this thing. And then I want to thank our sponsor, Audible. Audible is the number one, the source of all audiobooks in the universe, it seems. So if you like audiobooks, this is a place to go, audible.com. I have a link for you in the show notes. It's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That is the URL you should go to get a special deal. If you're joining audible.com, you'll also support the podcast in doing so. So I want to thank Audible for being a sponsor, and I want to thank Jose for being on the show. That was really awesome to have you on. Thanks for your thoughts on Apple and all things technology.
Thank you so much for the invite.
Absolutely. So stay tuned. We'll have another show next week, and we'll see you then. Cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with ThinQ, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.